That can be a lot. Not irregular, I would say, Board of Aldermen meeting. My only comment is I never thought 34 degrees could seem so long as it does today. But we'll start this. I believe it is mandatory that we take roll.
Yes. Alderman Gerber.
Here.
Alderman Harder.
Here.
Alderman Hughes.
Here.
Alderman Kinsella.
Here.
Alderman Sawyer.
Here.
And Alderman Schwer.
Present.
I have Alderman Friedman and Alderman Murphy as absent. Mary is presiding, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And today's meeting is simply to get an update on our deer management program, and I will let Mr. Shelton be our MC and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to give a little brief update on some information I provided at our retreat. But before I do, just by way of introduction, who our main speakers and answer your questions today will be Erin Shank, who has been involved with our program since the inception. Erin is a supervisor with the Department of Conservation. She's moved up since starting out, and she is a wildlife biologist supervisor and holds a master's degree in wildlife conservation. Also with us from the Department of Conservation is Miranda Wilkinson. Miranda also has a master's degree in wildlife conservation and is the urban wildlife biologist with the Department of Conservation. Ryan Rott has been involved in our program since its inception. He is with White Buffalo, and he'll give an update on where our numbers are. And then also I want to be sure to introduce Tom Thousand with our Public Works Department, also involved since the inception of our program. Tom is the boots on the ground. Anybody that's been involved, people in the front row are nodding their head up and down. Wouldn't be possible. Absolutely would not be possible without Tom. Appreciate here. Also, just so everybody knows, Ray Wagner is here. Ray is a commissioner with the Department of Conservation. So what I'd like to do is just real briefly give you some updated numbers. So we went through this information at the retreat, but basically when the program started, we're about 60 deer per square mile. Through the program, you can see the numbers taken each year. As we go down, there were some big years over 200. The numbers now, the last time we did the distance sampling, it was about 24 deer per square mile. Ryan tells us we'll be at probably around 50 this year taken, and he'll give some updates on what they're seeing with their distance sampling, that they actually track what the populations are. And then also we track the deer vehicle collisions. So as I told you at the retreat, they started up around 90. We averaged the first 10 years, they were about 85. We averaged the second 10 years of our program, and they're at about 54. This year, 2025, we were at 44 deer vehicle collisions. One is too many, but obviously the program has drastically reduced the number of deer vehicle collisions. Also, just FYI, I did take the number of deer through our program, which is about 50, the number of vehicle collisions, 44. We also pick up an additional 14. You always see it on your warrant list, now our payable list. And then we have another 16 that were taken by bow hunters in Queen Park. So altogether, that's 124 deer removed from our population last year. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Erin and Miranda to give you their perspective from the Department of Conservation.
And before you start, as someone who used to live in Wildwood eons ago, who's had a deer car interaction, it's really not much fun. It's not much fun at all.
So Erin and Miranda.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting us here today. As Bob has mentioned already, I've been partnered with Town and Country in my previous role with Department of Conservation since the beginning of deer management program, and really even before that as well. So I just kind of wanted to take a minute to talk about the Department of Conservation's role in urban deer management. So as the state department that sets the state wildlife code and enforces that code, we also work with communities on wildlife issues, whether that be nuisance issues or habitat improvement projects and whatnot, but also including urban deer management. So most urban deer management throughout the state, most deer management, but certainly most urban deer management as well occurs through our regular hunting seasons. So that would be between September 15th and January 15th each year, encompasses all of our various seasons for deer harvest. And then outside of that regular hunting season, we have different methods that can be specially authorized to, like the program in Town and Country, to help communities meet their deer management goals. And those methods include bait and sharpshoot, like is done in Town and Country, as well as in the city of DePere and the city of Wildwood, occasionally as well, through managed hunts. Those do also occur during the hunting season, but they are kind of separate from our hunting season in that those hunters are kind of drawn from a lottery system, and those deer do not count against their quota that they are allowed to take during the regular hunting season. And Queenie Park would be an example of a managed hunt that would impact the deer population in Town and Country. And we cooperate with St. Louis County Parks to administer that hunt, as well as a handful of others across the county. And then the other method that we can permit, but we kind of try not to, is trap and euthanasia, because that is really inefficient and pretty stressful on the animals themselves. However, if you're familiar with the history of Town and Country deer management, then you know that was a method that was utilized in Town and Country back in the early days of, I guess it was probably 2000, 2001, until about 2005. So those are the methods that are allowable by the wildlife code, by special authorization, or through our regular hunting season. And so when working with communities to kind of help figure out what method is going to work best for those communities, we serve in an advisory capacity, really. So some communities feel very comfortable with allowing for archery hunting, for example, on private properties to allow for the harvest of deer. Then we can work with them to craft an ordinance that would allow for that. Community like Town and Country has gone with the bait and sharpshoot as working well for your community. And so we work with you there to set harvest goals and to issue the authorization. So I just kind of wanted to go over some of our roles there. I wanted to also add that, in case, I think you guys are probably all aware, but to anyone listening online as well, any of the deer harvested through this special authorization, all those deer are put to use. They're donated by the city of Town and Country through our Share the Harvest program. And in our part of the state, all that meat ends up at Operation Food Search, the meat that's going for human consumption, or is utilized by the St. Louis Zoo on their wolf population reintroduction program, their rearing and reintroduction. So I just kind of wanted to make a note of that too, that resource is required by permit to be utilized. I'm going to ask you really quick. I know I forgot probably something important.
Do we want to address sterilization?
Could I just make one quick comment? And you correct me if I'm wrong. This is like a kudos to the Missouri Department of Conservation. I think I remember reading an article in your magazine, the Missouri Conservationist, that in the 1930s, there weren't many deer in Missouri, like many at all. Like if you saw hoof marks in the forest, as opposed to actually seeing a deer, that was kind of a big deal. That was the number of deer in the state was that sparse at that time.
That's correct. We estimate the population statewide probably got down below 1,000, which is pretty remarkable. Today's population is well over 1 million deer. Obviously that fluctuates depending on the time of year, but yes, when you think about it, over the last 100 years, whitetail deer is a tremendous conservation success story. And a lot of that is when the Department of Conservation was formed in 1937, one of the very first actions taken by by that department at that time was to shut down the harvest of deer entirely. So we're definitely living in a different time now. But I appreciate you bringing that up, Mayor, because I think that is a good perspective to keep in mind. So thank you.
Can you also just real briefly tell me where our state stands relative to other states in terms of that, what's it called, chronic wasting disease?
Sure. So chronic wasting disease is a 100% fatal deer disease. It is caused by a prion. Just to give you a little background to kind of define what it is. So a prion is a misfolded protein, so it's not a virus or a bacteria. And so there's a lot we have yet to learn about prion diseases, but one thing that we are coming to understand is that once those prions exist on the landscape, they persist. So unlike a virus that, when the host dies, the virus tends to not live on very long, those prions are not actually a living thing and they can continue to be infectious on the landscape. We don't know how long, but it seems quite a long time. This is just a disease of cervids. So those would include in Missouri white-tailed deer and elk. So that does not affect other animals beyond cervids. So chronic wasting disease was first detected in free-ranging deer in the late 2009, 2010. And so since then, we have been spending a lot of resources surveilling and controlling the spread of that disease. We have still a low prevalence rate, which is the good news. We do have chronic wasting disease in a number of counties throughout the state. Most recently, including St. Louis County, we have found our first positive in St. Louis County somewhat recently. But our prevalence appears statewide to still be below 2%, and that is very good news. And thanks to a lot of the control efforts that have been going on. So we are committed to managing that wildlife health threat in the long term.
Thank you.
Well, I was gonna say, it's also probably a good time to bring up the fact of like translocating deer or removing deer and bringing them to another location. Is a big disease spread is a huge issue with that. So a lot of people would like to see deer be removed and relocated somewhere else, out to a state park or, a conservation area somewhere else, so they're not gonna, die or whatever. But unfortunately, with not only chronic wasting disease, but we have epizootic hemorrhagic disease, blue tongue, other deer diseases. Translocation and removing deer and moving them to a new location is not really a viable option in this scenario.
And then,
now that there's a positive, are all the deer that are taken, are they being tested? Because obviously, I'm from Wisconsin, I have a huge hunting background, so I know all about chronic wasting disease and
Yes.
the problems with overpopulation. So are you going to advise White Buffalo to test the deer now that chronic wasting has been detected here?
Yes, so all deer donated through Share the Harvest and any of our counties under surveillance, which includes St. Louis County, are tested prior to the distribution of the meat.
just one other quick question. I've treated a few patients, not many, for Lyme disease. And I believe it started in New Haven, Connecticut, the first cases. And it's obviously more prevalent, I think, there and in the upper Midwest parts of Michigan. How's our rate of it in Missouri? I haven't really checked the stats on that lately. Just curious.
Lyme disease in particular is low, but other tick-borne diseases, ehrlichiosis in particular and alpha-gal are on the rise. And alpha-gal, we were just kind of talking about this, appears to be on a pretty precipitous, alarming rise, which is a tick-borne disease, and so we're seeing quite a bit of that. And alpha-gal,
That's a bad disease.
yes, that's the one that essentially triggers an allergy, so to speak, to red meat.
Thank you.
Thank you. And they'll obviously both be around answering questions. While I pull up Ryan Rott's screen, I did forget to mention, Ryan is actually a senior wildlife biologist with White Buffalo. He has a degree in wildlife science from Purdue University, right? Am I correct? And so he's had an opportunity to do some distance sampling. So Ryan, if you want to talk about what you're seeing.
Brian, we got to be thrilled for Indiana.
Yeah, as a Boilermaker, not as thrilled as if I was a Hoosier from IU, but yeah, it was a good night for Indiana last night. Just generally, for the folks that don't know me, my name's Ryan Rhodes. I'm a senior wildlife biologist with White Buffalo. We're a nonprofit wildlife research organization, so our specialty is really managing deer in suburban environments. And so that goes from suburban deer sharpshoots, managing regular hunts, contraceptive research, any way that you're trying to manipulate deer in suburbia, that's what we're involved in for the most part. As far as Town and Country goes, I've been here since White Buffalo implemented the program back in, I believe it was 2009, when it was both a combination program of sharpshoot and sterilization. And I've been on the project every year since. So anytime that we did a management operation in Town and Country, I've been here. The data that I'm going to present today is just the first 2 nights observation from the distance sampling. So the numbers that I'm going to quote may change, right? But as we did our route, it's substantially different than what it looked like even 10 years ago, right? Now, the kind of focal point of the deer population in town tends to be along Mason Road, adjacent to Queenie Park, and then there's still a small residual population in the Mason Valley area. Overall, we have another night's data in here. I think this was the first night's observation. We can bring it up. This is the second night observation. This is a cluster. I think there might have been 6 or 8 deer total in that group. And then obviously along Queenie Park down by the Dog Museum really tends to be the focal point of where we're seeing deer in the community. Quite the change from 10 years ago when you would have 30 or 40 deer along Topping Road. If you went across Thornhill, you'd probably see another 20. All the area up along Principia, down in through Town and Country Estates, Amersham, Bickford, that was all, just loaded with deer. So it's quite the change. When I run the first 2 nights data through program distance, it's coming up with about 12 to 15 deer per square mile in Town and Country with a range of about 7 to 22. So, when we started, it was 60. So you've reduced the population by roughly 70%. And that's low. I'll be honest, that's as low as we've reduced a population in a community, which wasn't a total eradication. So we've done eradications on mostly on islands, but in some national parks. But if this data holds with one more sample night, this will be as low as we've maintained a population. So from that standpoint, it's good, right? And then I do have one other, I think it's on here. Yeah. So what we've seen over time, and we take a lot of flack for this, right? The number of males that we harvest as part of the population is increasing, and it's a straight up trend from the start of the program. And while we don't know, what we believe is happening is as the population's reduced, as juvenile males disperse from other communities that have higher populations than Town and Country, if they happen to pass through Town and Country, there's going to be a lot less social pressure, right? There's a lot less deer on the landscape. And because of that, then they take up residence. So what that means is that the number of males compared to the number of females is likely rising in the community. And so that kind of has been reflective over the last, whatever it is, you got 16, 17 years, that number's kind of grown. And so it's just reflective of where we're at and as far as deer management in the community. You guys have any questions?
Does conservation tell you the types that you can harvest, or you just tracking to get numbers?
Yeah, it's stipulated the total number of antlered males that I can harvest, but they don't give me any direction on how that goes. From our perspective, we obviously target adult females if given the opportunity, but we'll take deer of either sex, right? It's like they both have the same likelihood of being hit by a car. They're both the same for disease vectors. It can be argued that the males do more landscape damage You know, it's like some of the residents in town are specifically wanting us to remove males because they're damaging their trees and landscapes. So, while we prioritize adult females, we'll take either sex based on opportunity.
But your cap, right, you can take a certain.
Correct. Any other questions?
How many communities do you serve? In like town and country, and then, I mean, just.
Probably this winter will probably be around 15.
Okay.
And that runs the gamut from, we've got 2 ongoing surgical sterilization projects. We got several sharpshoots. We'll do population estimates in probably a dozen communities. We've got research programs going on, so kind of runs the gamut. But, you know, locally here, we do 2 sharpshoot programs. And then in the past, we've done up to 3, plus a lot of population estimates as well.
All right, thank you.
Actually, Mr. Sheldon had notified me the other day that I think are you guys no longer able to do Bell Reeve? Or did you guys?
Yeah, that's correct.
How's that gonna affect the numbers and?
It probably affected this year's numbers by 20 deer. You know, if we look at what we harvested there last year, I think between the 2 sites up along the northern edge of Bell Reeve, that was 20 deer. My guess is that it would be something similar this year, so it probably impacted the harvest numbers by 20 deer.
And is that just for this year that you're not allowed to do it, or is it going to be moving forward, you're not going to be allowed to?
My belief is that it was a one-time event. It had to do with the timing of the program and hunting that was happening along that border in Ladue. And so MDC would be able to speak to that more directly, but, you know, I think that my hope is that this was a one-off and it was just a timing issue.
I didn't see anything up from Hunter Farms up there. In the past, that had been a huge area.
Yeah.
Is that down in nothing yet?
We haven't, well, we lost the 2 sites that were up in that area that were along Bell Reeve. We had one on Bell Reeve Country Club grounds, and then we had another one that was up on Muirfield. We haven't worked on Hunter Farms directly for probably 8 to 10 years. Yeah, we had access there, and their original property manager had passed away, and when he passed away, then we'd lost access to that property. And it was, honestly, it was never really as productive as we anticipated. We thought that we would harvest more deer there, but it really didn't pan out the way we had planned.
Thanks, Ryan. Super information, very helpful. I know that one of the arguments that bow hunters have made is that using the sharpshooting strategy is not as safe for people around, and it can be noisy and therefore disruptive. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you do to make certain that there's no risk of an injury to someone or any property? And in addition, is there any notification for people surrounding so they would expect to hear gunshots?
Yeah, generally, you know, we're using topographical relief to ensure that we've got a safe earthen backdrop, right? Whether that's being elevated off of a deck, a tree stand, using natural topography to make sure that if there was an errant shot, it would go into an earthen backdrop. That's the number one mechanism for safety. We also use a highly frangible bullet so that if they're having to hit a hard substrate, that it fragments so that no piece of substantive size or mass ends up exiting whatever it impacts. As far as the noise, we use suppression. Unfortunately, it's not like the movies. The silencers don't completely silence it because our bullets break the speed of sound, so you still get the sonic crack. But I would liken it to a muffler on your car, right? If the muffler's not working on your car, it's really loud, but if the muffler's on there, it's tolerable. So we use that. Typically, I notify the residents that are proximate to each site that I'm working. I notify the resident's property that we'd be working on, ask them if it was okay if we work on their property that evening. Once I get the okay, then I make the notifications to adjoining property owners. Typically, I'm looking for permission that it's okay, because it does me no good to try to work on their property if they've got a dinner party or something going on that's going to impact us. It's not good for them and it's not good for us. So I just make sure the communication's open. MDC gets notification of which properties that we're working on. And then Tom notifies the local PD of where we're working, so everybody's aware of where we're operating each evening.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
One quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of, and then when you shoot a deer, What percent drop dead right then, and what percent maybe wander off into somebody's yard?
We've had zero wander off into somebody's yard since 2009, right? We operate very conservatively, right? Sometimes the numbers don't reflect
I got it.
the decisions that we make, but safety is the number one priority. We've been doing this for 30 years, right? And you can't afford to take a risk, right?
And I
So
would assume the times that since you've been in town and country, there have been no constituents of the city who have been accidentally shot.
no. The other one is dogs. People worry about their pets, but the reality of the situation is if a pet's moving through your zone, the deer aren't there, right? So they're never, they're never at risk, right? And it's pretty easy to identify the difference between a dog and the deer. We're not shooting far distances, right?
I get it.
And that's the difference between bow hunting, and some people may not understand. Explain, when you shoot a deer with a bow, the prevalence of having to track the bow or track the deer, because it doesn't, when you bow hunt, it doesn't drop the deer, you have to track it. And you might want to explain that to some people who are not familiar with.
Yeah, I'm happy to. We euthanize all the deer that we remove, right? And if we follow the American Veterinary Medical Association standard for remote euthanasia, that's a gunshot to the center of the brain or the upper cervical spine, which is the C1 through C3. So all deer that we remove are dead instantaneously. That differs from archery, where even if you have a good shot, the flight distance is going to be 30 to 100 yards, right? And so when you look at property size, you really need to have good relationships with the surrounding properties, because it's likely that that animal will not perish on the property that you're working on if it's a reasonably small lot size, right? If you're working on one of the bigger estates in town and country where it would be 80 acres, maybe not a concern, but most of the properties are in the 3-acre neighborhood, right? So the likelihood is that that animal would exit the property.
Alderman Friedman.
2 questions. The first one is I had received a lot of emails from constituents suggesting sterilization and neutering versus sharpshooting. Can you address the pros and cons of both of those? My second question would be, you had thrown out some numbers as far as where our deer population stands at this point. I believe you said it was around 10 to 15 or something like 10, 17. That's below, I believe, our goal was originally 20. So at this point, moving forward, do we see that we need to continue having sharpshooting at this point if we are currently below our 20 number that we were trying to attain?
Yeah, certainly. So when we look at sterilization, and we'll have 2 ongoing sterilizations, two projects working this year. We've got one on Staten Island, which is male-based sterilization, and we have one up in Beechwood in South Euclid in Ohio that's a female-based sterilization. When we look at sterilization, the types of environments that are most appropriate is when you have high development, right? What's important is having access to the animals in a pretty short distance. So when you're trying to capture deer with darting equipment, which is what we use anesthesia agent put in a very small dart. You're looking at maybe 15 to 20 yards is as far as you can fire that dart safely. If you try to crank up the pressure higher than that, you run the risk of burying the dart in an animal and turning it into basically a projectile like an arrow. If you turn down the pressure too much, the deer is gone before the dart gets there. So kind of the critical window is that 15 to 20 yards. And so what you really are looking for is a development interface where you're able to interact with that animal at a relatively short distance. So that means a lot of roadways and small lot sizes work really best for sterilization. So when you look at it, it's like most of the places where we've been successful with sterilization type programs, it's really high development, right? So the deer have integrated themselves into, 1/8 acre, 1/4 acre, maybe 1/3 acre lots is the prevalent development type. We've done some projects that have bigger landscapes than that, but generally that's where it works best. So is it practical in town and country? The difficulty here would be the lot sizes are so large, right? You look at that interface where I can get within 20 yards of a roadway, that's pretty limited, right? And so being able to interact with those animals would be much more challenging. You could bring them to a bait site, similar to the way that we do sharpshooting, but that's pretty inefficient, right? You get one doe, you anesthetize her, you've got, usually it's about 5 to 7 minutes before she succeeds to anesthesia. So they can travel a pretty long ways in 5 to 7 minutes. If she moves from your bait site away and she has a female fawn with her, you no longer have the opportunity to capture her. And so you have to go in and pick up the animal, bring it out, do the sterilization. We do surgical-based sterilization, not chemical. So you'd have to bring her out, do the surgery, and you're disrupting the landscape. So it's a pretty inefficient process. It's much better if you can drive through town and interact with that deer off a roadway, right? Instead of trying to bait them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, there's some areas of town where we were pretty successful in the early days. Mason Valley was one of them, right? The developed lots were a little bit smaller. There's a pretty good network of roads in there. You could interact with the deer pretty well. I think the first year we might have captured, 100 deer, sterilized 100 deer. So at that time, there was a lot of deer that were very naive. One thing that's changed in town and country is the prevalence of coyotes. Literally every site that we worked on this year, there's been multiple coyotes. We started to see that last year. And so what has happened is now the deer are super skittish. When we would do the distance sampling at night in previous years, you'd drive around and you'd see a group of deer, you'd shine them with a spotlight, you'd get your binoculars out, you'd try to determine age and sex, right? And the deer would stand there and they'd be pretty naive. Now, if you slow down the vehicle, you shine a light on them, they're running. So if you look at, when we do the report, you'll be able to look at the raw data and there'll be a lot of undetermined, right? It's number of deer 3 and sex and age is unknown. It's because you saw the deer and by the time you mark them in the landscape, they've moved away so far that you can't tell if it's an adult female or a juvenile female or an antlerless male, right? And so that's likely a product of both the predation that's happening in town and low density, right? As the density decreases, typically the deer become a little more skittish. They don't need to interact with humans quite as much.
The second part of your question, would you take a year off if our density is this low?
I think so. I mean, it's like you do too good of work and you work yourself right out of a job. But if it holds that you guys are at 15 deer per square mile, yeah, I think it's suitable that you take a year off, especially if your goal is 20 to 30. And that goal is based on social carrying capacity, right? What will your community tolerate? I think Tom will attest, you don't get a lot of deer complaints anymore. One of our homeowners up on Dry Ridge said that he thought that the deer population was as low as it was when his father moved here back in the 80s. Which when he told me that, I was somewhat shocked. And it took us a little bit to understand what was happening this year, right? It was like we started the project, it was super mild. There was a heavy mass crop this year, so a lot of acorns, so there was a lot for the deer to eat. Bait consumption was way down. And we weren't sure if that was a product of a low population, super mild temperatures, or a lot of mass crop on the ground. So until I got out and did the first night of sampling, I wasn't 100% confident that what we were seeing was a low population. There was probably possibility that it was, just the mild temperatures in the acorn crop. But yeah, based on 2 nights data, I'm pretty confident that we're on population.
Where I'm from in Wisconsin, there's a lot of times people, and you guys have degrees can verify this, but the animals sometimes they learn and they know not to go into areas where they know they're going to get shot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in other areas, is there other areas around here that they could be going to? And say if we take a year off, we're like, oh, this place is safe again, and then because depending on how in Wisconsin there's T zones, certain you know, areas you can take more deer or not, like deer, they're smart, they tend to, year after year, a couple years in a row, the numbers drop because they go somewhere else because they know they're gonna get shot. So
That
is
deer
there other
definitely-
areas you think that they might be going other than like Queenie? Are they dispersing because they know this is not a safe area for them, or?
Well, all the data that we have is that the home range of deer in suburbia is pretty small, right? You're looking at a doe has maybe a home range of 160 acres, a buck double that, right? They don't know what's over in De Pere or over in Wild, and they're not going there, right? The theory behind dispersal in deer is, it's called the rose petal theory, but you have a matriarch doe and she has female offspring. Her female offspring are slightly overlap her home range, and that's how the population grows. The males disperse much further, right? It's not atypical to see a male disperse 5 miles or more. And that's, we think, nobody knows for sure, but we think that that's to help prevent inbreeding, right? You don't want a dominant males being in the same home range as their mother or their sisters or other siblings. So they disperse greater distances. So what you're likely to see is that you're going to get some ingress and you're going to get some egress. When populations are probably similar, that probably balances out. But since you're at a lower density than some of the surrounding communities, you're probably a net gainer as far as dispersal events go.
And if I could just, I'll get you 1 second, but tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, I think sterilization isn't legal in Missouri anyway? Or is it?
I'll let Aaron answer that. That's not my cup of tea.
Did you say bug sterilization? Is that-
I mean, just sterilizing.
Oh, okay. So any kind of fertility control, including sterilization on a native wildlife species in Missouri, requires a written authorization from the director. So it is not legal without that. Now, we did cooperate with Town and Country in 2009 and 2010 on the sterilization project in order to authorize that. And that had never been done before in Missouri, and we still have to learn, and we did learn a lot from that project. So to answer your question, it's kind of no, it's not legal, but we can allow for that authorization.
And I don't want to belabor us here too much longer, but like in a 30-second capsule, tell me how we're doing with our bear population.
Our bear population?
Yeah, how we doing?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the bear population is healthy and expanding. And actually, it's a timely question, especially for St. Louis communities. I spoke recently to the City Managers Association and kind of mentioned that it is not too soon to be talking bear aware to your residents. It's not an imminent thing that we're gonna have an urban bear population in St. Louis, but we do, all the models are that bears are, that population is expanding, and it is likely going to kind of expand up that Merrimack River corridor towards St. Louis. So just thinking about things like trash, trash maintenance and whatnot, that's gonna become a bigger thing over the next generation.
Thank you.
How about the coyote? Because
Sure.
I live on 1.5 acres and I've seen, I don't know, the same one repeatedly, but I mean, I've seen more coyote than usual. Is that something also we should be?
We've seen coyotes have expanded all throughout North America and really exist in all landscapes, basically, throughout North America, including cities and towns. And so their population, like most populations, will ebb and flow, just as those population dynamics go. One of the big mortality, or causes of mortality amongst our coyote populations, other than cars, is mange. So we do see occasional sarcoptic mange outbreaks, which tends to reduce the population back down. So I don't know if Town and Country is kind of right for seeing some of that happen. We can't really predict that necessarily. That said, we don't manage coyotes like we do white-tailed deer, in that coyotes, being a totally different species, reproduce based on social hierarchy. And so, it's just a whole other ball of wax.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Wagner, since you're a commissioner on the Missouri Department of Conservation, is there anything you want to add or say? I just want to afford you the opportunity if you want.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here. I learned about this meeting through Alderman Kinsella, who mentioned it to me a week or so ago. And I thought I would come as much as a resident of Town and Country, which I've been for the last 3 or 4 years as a commissioner. I grew up in the Baldwin area, and I was around when there were no deer. There were more quail at that time, and that is the ebb and flow of the wildlife system, which makes it so fascinating. There were not many coyotes, and there, my daughter corrected me, said, "No, Dad, it's coyotes." I said, "No, Mary, it's coyotes," when I'm involved with the commission, so I don't know what it is, Missouri. But when that conversation came up, I did make mental note that there was an article put out, a press release, about watch your pets during these next 2 months, because coyotes are in their mating season, and I showed that to my 3 children to beware of their dogs, even let out for 60 seconds in the backyard. So that's an observation put out by the MDC. Deer management is something that is taken very seriously by the MDC and by the commission. The whole discussion, the CWD, the studies of what's going on in Wisconsin, and all of that has been front of mind to the commission and to the department, to the director, who himself was the lead deer biologist early in his career. And so we watch and undertake every action we can. And Missouri has largely been regarded as really state-of-the-art, top of class in its management techniques. And those are always evolving, as you saw just 2 or 3 weeks ago with the CWD program. But I have been aware of Town and Country, of the programs here, just from living here. I'm watching what's going on in Wildwood, and I understand the citizen concern, but I also know that the community is in great hands by being aware and by addressing it and getting involved. And so it's professionals like these folks and others from the department that make it a pleasure for me to be a part of. And their awareness, I guess, is in our future. I'm pretty confident. I'm told, I asked the question, when are elk going to start wandering up Highway 44? And I'm assured that that's not going to happen for many years. That will be a menace to your gardens when that happens, I'm sure. But, by then, we'll continue to be in great hands. But thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for having the concern to do this. And we're here for you in the future.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our guests for coming and presenting this information, for members of the community who came here. I'd like to thank the Board of Aldermen for taking time out of their day. And I think, personally, I think this is very helpful for me, frankly. And so a lot of very informative.
We had a show.
I'm sorry.
We had a video that we wanted to show.
Yeah,
Very short about the.
Alderman Gerber had sent a video and said if we had time, it's, I think, 5 minutes. So.
That'd be fine.
Hand out the.
It starts at 25 seconds, so you can,
Oh, we have 25 seconds.
you can jump ahead.
Looks like there's closed caption too. Oh, Morgan, for audio, can I just put this microphone down?
It'll play through the
It'll play?
speakers. Mhm. Mayor, can I have a copy of whatever you're passing?
Yes, actually.
Start with the one here.
Well, we can
Over here.
It's here, Mark.
I've been working.
Do it for 25 seconds.
Hi, my name is Alan Luther. I'm the Director of Health Center for Animal and Public Policy, as well as an Associate Research Professor in the Department of Infectious Disease and Global Health at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. I've been working on wildlife fertility control for about 30 years, mostly concentrating on deer and horses. I'm particularly interested in the application of non-invasive contraception to urban and suburban deer populations. So that's where much of my emphasis has been. I've been working primarily with the porcine zone pellucida, or PZP vaccine. We like the PZP vaccine because the mechanism by which it operates doesn't involve any sort of broad behavioral or hormonal effects. It targets specifically the fertilization process and is as non-invasive as something like this can be. So what we've done over the last 30 years is we've shown that the vaccine works on individuals. We've shown a variety of situations that we can also control populations with it. There are actually two versions. One is a version which is registered with EPA called Zonistat, which requires annual boosters, which is only effective in places where you can get a dart or a vaccine into animals pretty much every year, which is hard to do in free-roaming populations of anything. The other version, which we have been working on for both horses and deer, is called PZP-22. And PZP-22 works as a one-shot multi-year vaccine because it includes controlled release pellets that act as boosters effectively. And so for deer, what we find is a single injection of PZP-22 will give about 2 to 3 years worth of contraception, and a booster for PZP-22 or with the Zonistat, the native PZP, will add another 3, 4, or more years of contraception. So for a lot of places, a lot of circumstances, that may be an effective version of the vaccine. We have approached population control in a couple of places. Some of them have been islands, but the most recent place that we worked, Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, is not an island, and we were able to reduce the deer population by 50% over 5 years or so. That village is about 3 square miles. It's on the Hudson River. It has river boundaries on all of their sides. So that's where we are technically. There are a couple of things that we're trying to improve. First, for practical reasons and for research reasons, we've mostly been capturing deer and ear tagging them, so we know who's been treated and who hasn't, and can follow them individually for their reproduction. And so we're trying a couple of different things to see if we can figure out a way around that. The other issues are political and regulatory. So many states, most states, perhaps don't have mechanisms by which they can issue permits to manage wildlife populations with PCP. So that is one challenge. The other is that it needs to be registered with EPA as a pesticide of all things. And so the Zonistat vaccine is already registered, but the PZP-22 is not. We're in the process of working with EPA and with the manufacturers of the components to see if we can get that through. But at this point, we're not sure how long it will take, especially with the EPA and the condition that it's in right now. We've had complete turnover of personnel in the last 2 years, so that the people who are there now are pretty familiar with what we're doing. In any case, we're looking forward to making it work. As I say, technically, the vaccine works well because deer tend to stay put. Female deer tend to stay put. It works pretty well on a local level, but we still have these technical and political challenges to overcome. Thank you.
Sure. Just wanted to mention, of course, you said it's not regulated even at the national level yet. So I just wanted to show this, to kind of put it on the radar for the future. It would be a way that could control fertility especially since we're down so low. When we go back up again, it may be something we want to look at when it gets regulated, and of course, we'd have to talk to NBC and see what they thought about it.
Thank you, thank you. And now I think we probably need, can I just take an informal, move to adjourn? Second,
Second.
all in favor? Thanks, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Hearing objection.